Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence, we go up to all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun. All right, guys. Today's date, October the 4th, 2023, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most, Will Buchanan. How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. Before we get started, guys, let you know that we are a news podcast, which means we do try to search for the most reputable sources out there. We do not do sensationalism or shock news like Fox News or whatever extreme conservative or extreme liberalist news out there. We repeat only the facts, just the facts, in order for you to inform yourself. And basically not to have you go paranoia like everybody did when they got that text message earlier today. But aside from that, we do try to watch our language, but sometimes, hey, words do fly. At the same time, maybe things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, how do we start this? Well, there's really not a way to start this. All I can say is, can't believe they did it. That 15-time champ, Kevin McCarthy, for the first time in our history, a speaker has been removed.
Tonight, Kevin McCarthy's short and rocky run as Speaker of the House of Representatives has come to an end. The California Republican, who until a few hours ago was second in line to the presidency, was voted out of the speakership this afternoon, 9 months after he was elected to the job. His ouster came after key members of the narrow Republican majority he presided over turned on him in a dramatic statement of no confidence. The final vote, 216 to 210, with Democrats overwhelmingly joining dissatisfied Republicans in voting against him. The call for McCarthy's removal was instigated by Congressman Matt Gaetz just days after McCarthy made a deal with Democrats to keep the government open without deep spending cuts some Republicans wanted. Garrett Hake has been watching it all for us and has the latest.
Tonight, after an historic vote in the U.S. House, now former Speaker Kevin McCarthy returning to an office that is no longer his.
I can continue to fight, maybe in a different manner. I will not run for Speaker again.
The office of Speaker of the House of the United States House of Representatives is hereby declared vacant.
Acting on a motion by Florida Republican Matt Gaetz, 8 Republicans joining with Democrats in voting to vacate the position of Speaker for the first time ever, following an impassioned floor debate.
It's disgusting. It's what's disgusting about Washington.
It's selfish, bad for conservative policies, and bad for America. That's why I strongly support Speaker Kevin McCarthy.
There's nothing selfish about wanting a Speaker of the House who tells the truth.
North Carolina Republican Patrick McHenry taking over as temporary Speaker.
The chair declares the House in recess, subject to the call of the chair.
Gaetz declaring victory.
It's the benefit of this country that we have a better Speaker of the House than Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy couldn't keep his word.
While McCarthy's allies heaped scorn on the Republican rebels for dividing the party.
Matt Gaetz wants to wreak havoc and chaos within the Republican Party. And he's doing just that. And unfortunately, the American people are pawns in his narcissistic game of charades.
The seed for Gaetz' challenge to McCarthy was planted in January, when the Florida firebrand was the last Republican holdout to oppose making McCarthy Speaker, eventually switching his vote to present on the 15th ballot. After McCarthy worked with Democrats to temporarily delay a government shutdown this weekend, Gaetz vowed to try to remove him, with McCarthy saying today,
I think Matt has planned this all along. It didn't matter what we transpired.
Projecting confidence even as he arrived for the vote.
Look, I'm an optimist because I think there's no point in being anything else.
The narrowly divided House left Democrats an opening. Would they intervene to save a leader many despise?
That just nobody trusts Kevin McCarthy.
Nobody trusts Kevin McCarthy. Nobody trusts Kevin McCarthy. And why should we?
after a 2-hour meeting, the Democratic leader announcing they'd stay out of the GOP's civil war, but vote against McCarthy.
And Garrett joins me now. Garrett, what happens now?
So what happens next? The House has to select a new speaker, and soon. But members have been told there are no more votes this week, meaning any new speaker would come next week as House Republicans try to plot a path forward for their fractured party. Lester?
Garrett Haig, thank you.
Okay, so let's just stop there for a second because, again, this has never happened in the history of the United States ever having a Congress. No Speaker of the House has ever had a vote of no confidence, and it passed. So, again, that part right there is not only history making, but wow, that Matt Gaetz of all people is going to talk about, we need a speaker who's honest. Well, I want a politician that doesn't mess with anybody that's under 18. I'm looking at you, Matt Gaetz. But it's also crazy because I've said on this podcast many times, the one thing about the Republican Party, although they don't stand for anything but old white men, but the one thing they always used to do was toe the party line. Oh, it was a mob. If you went against the mob, you were excommunicated. Don't believe me? There's plenty of people out there that went against the Republican wave, even when Trump was president, only to find themselves out of office, or outvoted, or ran against. There's plenty of them out there like that. But it's crazy that Kevin McCarthy, again, this is a man who was literally put up 15 times to be elected House Speaker. Matt Gaetz, Lorraine Bobbert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and the rest of the crazy idiots out there were all against him because they felt like McCarthy wouldn't stand up for their principles. They wanted deep cuts. This is actually where it all stems from, is literally from the government shutdown that just got pushed back for 45 days. That Matt Gaetz and so many of his other MAGA Republicans wanted deep cuts to the spending because, for Republicans, it's always been, well, Democrats always spend. They don't ever think about who pays all this. I think secretly they're talking about themselves because Republicans have always tanked. And again, feel free to call me out on this. I don't think I'm wrong, though, because facts and history prove me right. That in every Republican administration, the economy has taken major hits, major cuts, and it's taken 2 terms of a Democratic administration to right the ship. It's been that way since the beginning of history. And since Trump decided to do what he always does, tanks everything and then tries to bankrupt it, well, that puts us in the situation we are in now. Now, why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this because Matt Gaetz and others, when they elected Kevin McCarthy, were all saying that, hey, when it comes time to, we want 2 things to be done. We want Biden impeached. We want you leading it. At the same time, we want to cut the budget. What we want to cut is things that actually help people, not what helps the rich or corporations or things of that nature. We want to cut benefits. We want to try to get into Medicare. We want to privatize education. We want to wreck everything because we believe it's bad and we believe we can do better. Kevin McCarthy, I guess, agreed. That's going to be the House Speaker. But, he was put in an impossible situation if you think about it. Because just last Saturday, if they didn't get a deal done, the government would be shut down, which means that government workers would be furloughed. Although Social Security payments will still go out, there's a lot of government services like childcare, SNAP, benefits, things of that nature that would get halted if the government shut down. But politicians on the Hill, politicians in the Senate, and politicians in the House would still get paid. Which is the one that I keep bringing up with people, that for a government shutdown, you do know a senator or representative still gets paid. But not the government workers, not those who get SNAP benefits, not those that get cash payments to actually help them pay for certain things. Those things stop. But it amazes me so that no one ever sits there and wonders that politicians still get paid in the middle of a government shutdown? Yep. And now, we're just another 45 days away from another potential talk of a shutdown. And now you remove the one guy who was actually willing to do something because, again, he was put in an impossible situation. Either he would turn around and make a deal with Democrats, or he would side with his party and just say, you know what, we'll let the government be shut down. So you basically bit into our demands. So it was a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. That also being said, the Democrats were like, oh, well, we could just abstain from this which I thought was crazy because you had Mr. Jeffries, who was the minority leader, sit there and say, "No, we're out of this GOP infighting. We're out of it." Yet 6 Democrats voted yes to a vote of non-confidence. Isn't that just a little weird? 6 Democrats joined the Republicans. If it wasn't for those 6 Democrats, McCarthy would still be Speaker. But it amazes me so that we're still in that situation that I have to ask that question. Like, if Democrats are out of it, then why did the 6 that agreed to vote him out do it? I mean, say what you want about McCarthy. I mean, yes, he's wishy-washy. He's flip-floppy. He went on Fox News and blamed the Democrats right before this vote. He went ahead on anywhere that he can go to. I mean, he was towing the company party line, except when it comes to giving out deals in which, again, his constituents didn't like, specifically Matt Gaetz. And, it brings up the question of what happens now. As you heard from the journalists, they do have to pick a new Speaker of the House, and it hasn't even been 48 hours, and we've already got 2 names.
Have 2 official candidates for Speaker, Steve Scalise, who just announced, and Jim Jordan, who already has multiple endorsements in his bid to replace Kevin McCarthy, Representative Darrell Issa, Jim Banks, even Matt Gaetz himself. But Scalise and Jordan are not likely the only options. We're keeping a close eye on at least 4 other potential candidates for Speaker. To break it all down, let's bring in Ali Vitale from Capitol Hill and Betsy Woodruff Swan, Politico national correspondent and an MSNBC contributor. Great to see you both. All right, so walk us through where this all stands right now, Ali. Sort of handicap what it looks like right now in these early hours of the Speaker's race.
It's still pretty much a mess, Chris. No one has made decisions in terms of who they're going to support. My colleague Scott Wong and I were able to report this morning that overnight, Congressman Scalise had been making phone calls, trying to make some initial inquiries to some of his colleagues about how they would feel about him as a speaker. Of course, he's been getting a seemingly positive reception to that because in just the last few hours, he made it official, sending a letter, filing to his conference that he is going to be putting himself up for speaker. And in many ways, that's unexpected, given the fact that he is the current number 2 Republican. He has served in leadership before. He has been in Congress many years. And he's someone who's well known to this conference. That's not to say that he's not going to have numbers problems, especially when you consider the fact that he's far from the only one running. Congressman Jim Jordan, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, leading the oversight charge right now, along with several other chairmen, has also put his name forward. He was the first to officially do so. I caught up with Jordan this morning. He was trying to talk about the hard focus that he has on immigration, on oversight, the work that he has done against the Biden administration, all of those meant to appeal to the conservative parts of his conference. Nevertheless, it might not make him the only one. I also spoke with Kevin Hern, who's the head of the Republican Study Committee, who is clearly weighing his own run here. So they are going to have a lot of options in terms of who they could turn to next. Really, this will come to a head early next week, though, Chris, because starting on Tuesday, they're going to do basically some closed door pitches to their colleagues, the people who are actually running for speaker. Then come Wednesday, they'll do a vote behind closed doors. We've seen them do this before. They actually did it with McCarthy and the rest of the leadership slate at the end of last year before he officially was voted during those 15 ballot rounds to actually be speaker. So this is actually, as far as you can say about these unprecedented times, business as usual for how they should select a new speaker. But I think it's going to be slow. I think it's going to be chaotic. And I think it's
going to be a shit show. That it really will be. Steve Scalise, that man just, if I will tell you something about Steve Scalise real quick. Scalise. If there was ever a person that screamed company man, that's him. Whatever Republicans want, he'll do it. No problem. Jim Jordan, a man who believed that the FBI was being weaponized against President Trump and has a raging hard-on for Hunter Biden. Yeah, that guy. Let's not also forget his little participation in Benghazi. But these are the people that are coming forward and now all want the House Speaker spot. And I'm telling you what's going to happen. They want someone who's not going to be a Kevin McCarthy type. There's going to be someone that's going to go nose to nose to Democrats that wants to sit there and will hold the government and will hold American lives in their hand and not care because they want to try to get what they want, and they will hold the American people as a political pawn to do so. Because I'm going to be honest with you, on the Republican side, there is not one candidate among them that isn't worth their grain of salt. Really isn't. Because I guarantee it, and we've seen this already, mind you. Whoever decides to go and get elected as speaker, Matt Gaetz and those other crazy people inside that freaking party run the show. We've seen that with McCarthy. We'll see it with the next one. Because if they don't do what the Republican Party wants them to do, they will have a very short time as Speaker of the House, even though Kevin McCarthy is the first guy to literally and figuratively be removed as House Speaker during a term. But get ready for the shit show, folks. It's even worse. It's even worse than the second Republican National Convention debate, which we'll get into momentarily. But first, how about some good news? Would you like to see Trump at trial? It's fun.
In courtroom, Donald Trump's financial statements back on trial this morning. But it's Mr. Trump's increasingly inflammatory comments and social media posts outside of court that's landing him in hot water with the judge who will decide the penalty for his namesake company, found liable of engaging in brazen financial fraud.
This trial is a rigged trial. It's a fraudulent trial. Frankly, you saw what was just put out about Schumer and the principal clerk. That is disgraceful.
What was put out by Mr. Trump himself, a photo since taken down of the judge's law clerk posing with Democratic Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, the unmistakable suggestion that Mr. Trump can't get a fair shake at trial as he continues to rail against the case as politically motivated, causing Judge Engoron to hand down a limited gag order. Mr. Trump now banned from talking about court staff. But continuing to attack New York's Attorney General, Letitia James.
Any comment on the gag order?
Her office walking the judge through hours of Mr. Trump's finances in painstaking detail as it tries to prove the Trump organization and its executives intentionally falsified their business records in the hopes of securing favorable loan terms and insurance rates. While Mr. Trump's legal team argues the state cannot prove any intent to defraud. Yet on the witness stand, Mr. Trump's longtime accountant at Mazars admitted that the Trump organization didn't provide his firm with all of the necessary records to accurately complete the financial statement so central to the case.
That is the defendants and the defendants alone who provided the numbers, the data, and the false valuations.
Also central to the case, the Republican presidential frontrunner opting to step off the campaign trail back in court today, saying he too will take the stand.
Mr. Trump, will you be testifying?
Yes, I will. At the appropriate time, I will be.
Now, in reality, Mr. Trump's testimony is still weeks away here. The next major witness to take the stand, likely his company's chief financial officer, who went to prison briefly for tax-related crimes, and Mr. Trump has said was helping to prepare the financial statements that are so contested in this case, guys.
What's so interesting about all this is that the simple fact of the matter that, number one, Trump is in a courtroom, which, it's not weird. It's completely custom because he's used to lawyering and litigating his way out of everything he's ever done in life. But for once, he actually has to do what the judge wants him to do. Shut up. Considering the fact that this is a $250 million civil fraud trial because his business was a little bit funny on the books. And I love this. Trump is, and this is not to be mean. It really isn't. It's not to be mean, but it couldn't have happened to a better guy. Mr. Teflon Don, which Mr. Nothing, Mr. Lack of accountability. I could do what I want. He's basically a Napkin American's wet dream to do exactly what he wants with zero consequence. Well, karma showed up. So it's always amazing. It's like, oh, well, this is a witch hunt. The judge is against me. I'll never get a fair trial. Dude, you've gotten more fair trials than most mob bosses have gotten ever since the introduction of organized crime. At the same time, he is still claiming his innocence. Consider the fact that almost everyone in his administration has either been indicted, arrested, or in jail. His COO just a few months ago found guilty and was sent to jail. So I'm sorry, Trump, I can't really feel bad for you, but anybody that's ever been to a court case will literally tell you, you cannot say anything about what happens in court, nor would you want to mention that if you have a lawyer that has a decent law degree will tell you that. What does Trump do? Decides to spill all the tea and doesn't care who hears it. That alone, my friends, is worth the price of admission. Keep in mind, Trump is facing multiple lawsuits. The biggest ones, however, of course, the voter fraud in Georgia, and of course, the documents which him and the FBI are still beefing about when he decided to take them to Florida because he thought he could just declassify everything. That's just the tip of the that's just tips of this humongous iceberg that the SS Trump is headed toward. And trust me, it's going to be a crap show. But you know the funny thing about all this is, even with Trump sitting in jail, looking just defeated, deflated, if you will, would you believe that because he's not at a Republican primary debate that the viewership has dropped? I'm just saying, case in point, I am talking about the second Republican primary debate that happened on Wednesday. And it had the lowest viewership of any Republican presidential candidate, a presidential debate since Trump became a candidate. Lowest. I mean, you had your Nikki Haley, you had your Governor Ron DeSantis, your Vivek Swarney, your Mike Pence, your Tim Scott, and that's freaking it. Because the field, ladies and gentlemen, is getting smaller because of candidate rules. You had to qualify to basically be in the next primary debate. Even though it was on Fox News and Univision, it was still a low view. Now, I know a lot of people are asking, well, what is that going to do with anything? It has to do with optics. Now, the one thing I can't stand about Trump is the one thing that he's absolutely right about. He's absolutely spot on. He doesn't have to attend these debates because he's leading. Because there's still people out there, contrary to popular belief, there's still a lot of people out there who believe Trump is still a rightful president. They still believe that the election was stolen. They still believe that they believe that there's an actor in power until Trump comes back. There are still people out there that believe Trump has done nothing wrong. There are people out there who are living in hovels of just dung and crap. Will believe that their lives are much better off under Trump than they were under President Biden. Now, here's the messed up part about all that is, there's a large number of those individuals out there. Hence why I say voting is going to be so crucial come next year. Because don't just assume, and I say this all the time, don't assume between the 6 lawsuits that Trump has, between his fraud, between his try to change the election in Georgia, between his seize of documents out of Florida. With all that being said, do not put it past him that he can somehow still get the nomination. Because if he's still out and free, guess what? He can still get the nomination. But there's so many other great candidates. Who? Nikki Haley? That's not even her real name. And also, look at the time it took for a woman on a GOP ticket to even be nominated. The last one was Sarah Palin, and she wasn't nominated for her smarts. She was basically eye candy on John McCain's arm. Don't believe me? Look at all the wonderful things that Sarah Palin's likeness has brought to American media. You can go from there as far as what I'm referring to. That also being said, Vivek Prashani, a guy who is literally Ron DeSantis if Ron DeSantis was of a different descent. The man who literally lied to get a grant, completely decided to talk about American history as if it was all rosy, says that CRT is being taught everywhere. Gee, because he's not white, I wonder why he's not getting votes. Oh, I can keep going. Let's talk about Tim Scott, a black man, the only black man in the Republican GOP who is a senator who has a snowball's chance in hell of getting the nomination. A man who sat there and said that, workers that are striking should be fired, according to former president, now President Jesus Ronald Reagan. The man who, again, says that a man who, again, single-handedly killed the George Floyd police reform bill, who single-handedly killed the Voting Rights Act, and supports law enforcement because he does all the things the Republican Party tells him to do, because if he doesn't, they don't cut the check. Mike Pence, America's creepiest Christian. I can just stop right there with him. But that's the current field right now. And a lot of people who are conservatives are going, we'll take our chance with Dorito. And again, this is why Trump keeps saying, why don't you go to debates? I'm leading. They have to match up with me. And that's the thing I'm trying to get people to understand. That you might say, well, that's stupid of Trump not to be at these debates. No, because he's right. He's leading. He just has to show up at a rally, do his usual shtick, ask for donations, and leave. That is all he has to do. It is the candidates that come forward are going to have the biggest problem. Because what about Governor DeSantis? He also has a problem. He has to realize Florida, where his kingdom was, that he loved playing governor/dictator in. Florida is a small pond compared to the rest of the United States. And not everybody is going to join the DeSantis train. Especially for a man that took on Disney, especially for a man who definitely does not like LGBTQ plus people, for a man who definitely does not like African American AP history so much that he had the curriculum change in his state, banned CRT when CRT wasn't being taught anywhere, and put up a "Don't Say Gay" bill. And he's wondering why he's having such a hard time in other states. I can keep going about every one of these candidates and the issues they're going to run into trying to get the Republican nomination. Because unless you're rich, unless you're white, unless you have a certain hatred, you can't be a part of the party. That's why I say Nikki Haley and Tim Scott and Vivek Ramaswamy, just those three alone, you guys aren't going to get it. So what you got left? You got DeSantis, who's basically Trump 2.0, and America's creepiest Christian, Mike Pence. You might as well roll the dice and just see what happens if you stick with the GOP. But again, I digress. That's the reason why Trump, although he might be defeated in the courts, still went in the polls. And that alone should be concern for what happens next year. But moving right along, guys, I wanted to cover this story anyway because I covered this last week, that there is a group out there, and I want to point this out, the Fearless Fund. There's a venture capital firm called the Fearless Fund that basically gives grants exclusively to Black women entrepreneurs. Now, a white man had a problem with this. Go figure. That even so much that he tried to cite equal rights, that, he tried to cite a certain section of U.S. code that says that equal and fair treatment must be given upon all. Now, I thought that was crazy at first because, well, the first judge heard this and was like, man, get the fuck on. Threw out the case. Well, unfortunately, he did find a federal appeals court that did block the grant for this as it's being looked into. Now, again, I keep talking about the Fearless Fund because for people of color, you should know this. Because, again, if you are a Black woman or just a minority in general, it is very hard to start a business in America. It really is. Don't let social media fool you, especially with things that you're trying to do as a person of color. And that you have equity firms like the Fearless Fund who are basically trying to help Black women, specifically Black women, but helping people of color. But it is funny to me that the man who decided to push this basically cited U.S. Code 1981, Section 42, is what he tried to say that they violated. Now, keep in mind, there's just one thing about this that just screams racism to me. It does, because it's almost as if saying, like, if your boy won the Powerball, I decided to start an equity firm that specifically funded people of color. Would people come looking for me? Yes. Now, I expect African Americans to. Well, you're helping out black people. That's just racist. Really, your ancestors helped themselves for 400 years. We're still looking for our check. But now that we got money and we're helping each other, now you feel left out. Kind of feels like history is repeating itself all over again. But we'll follow that story, guys. Again, that is still being looked into because I just think that is nuts. That you basically, it is almost as if someone had said it so eloquently. No matter what we try to do on our own, we will never be left alone because they will always want what we have. And all I can say is I completely get it. But we'll follow that story as it goes, long as it goes to the appeals court. From my home state of Tennessee, progressively backwards ass Tennessee. One of these representatives, when I actually got to meet in person, and think he is definitely a good man and really shows a future in Tennessee politics being progressive. But the man you see right there, Representative Justin Jones. Now, you wonder why I bring him up, because him and Mr. Peterson, which seems like years ago, basically fought for the right to be heard on their floor after we had another mass shootout at a school, to where people were sitting there saying enough is enough, something needs to be done. And of course, Sexton and the rest of the Tennessee State Legislature basically fell on deaf ears. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because Representative Justin Jones, a very eloquent, a very intelligent speaking young man, is basically saying that he is not being heard. Imagine being paid to do your job at a state legislature, where the house that you all reside in, to basically talk lawmaking and discuss things of that nature. Imagine that the Speaker of the State House refuses to hear you out. That is what's happening with Mr. Justin Jones. Because keep in mind, him and Mr. Peterson were expelled at one point because of the fact that they spoke out against gun violence and pretty much called out everybody in the chamber, as they should have, only for them to win their seats and come back. But at the same time, Mr. Jones wanted to bring forward a vote of confidence to Mr. Sexton, which I love. He sat there and tried his hardest to bring it to a point of order, in which they did not. Actually ignored him at some point, even tried to get him to be silenced during their congressional sections. Congressional session is the word I'm looking for. But he basically is trying to express his views on critical issues, but cannot, because again, Mr. Sexton himself, for all those that don't want to who know Cameron Sexton is, it's this African American right here, who looks like he is staying more constipated, but cannot swallow the Subway sandwich that's still stuck in his jaw. But that is the man right there that causes issues, and at the same time does not like Justin Jones. Judging by how he looks constipated, I can only think of one other reason why he does not like an intelligent black man: jealousy. But just from a joking standpoint. But no. But that is actually Speaker Cameron Sexton. And again, I don't blame Justin Jones for bringing this up, because it is already hard as a person of color. But when you're a person of color that's basically in Congress and you're trying to get things done, it's a little difficult to do when those in the House are already against you. So again, rooting for Mr. Justin Jones, rooting for Mr. Peterson, because again, those two gentlemen are very bright, shining stars, and gives me a little bit of hope for progressively backwards ass Tennessee. But hey, they'll still play Rocky Top to death. Trust me, I hear it all doggone day. Anyway, moving on to the strikes, because there are a few. We do want to catch up with the auto worker strike, because it is definitely both sides are digging in. And again, if you're trying to buy a vehicle, if I were you, I'd wait.
Workers says there's still a long way to go before the union reaches a possible deal with car maker Ford, despite Ford saying earlier in the day that the two sides were making significant progress. While the union chief says they are far apart on core economic proposals around wage increases, retirement, health care, job security amid the industry's transition to electric vehicles. Well, the UAW again expanded its strike against GM and Ford on Friday, with thousands more workers joining the picket lines at factories in Illinois and Michigan.
And so nothing's changed from day one of where we stand and what we expect. It's unfortunate the companies chose to wait almost 7 weeks to get serious about bargaining. They've put themselves in this position. So, no expectations haven't changed. Our demands haven't changed. And, we're bargaining hard. We've been there every day.
Well, meanwhile, the union says negotiations are progressing with Stellantis. In total, more than 25,000 workers are striking across all three automakers.
So again, there is no other way to say this, but this has become we went from hot labor summer to now you about to run your pockets winter. Because again, I said this multiple times on this podcast, the Union Auto Workers is one of the biggest unions in the United States, well over 150,000 members. That's the one group of people you do not want to tick off. Not if you care about your business. Not only do you care about your business, but your dealers, your part suppliers, that entire supply chain is taking a hit right now just because those workers not being online and producing those cars is costing these companies billions. Now, you guys have already heard, because I did play from the two CEOs of Ford and General Motors and the one CEO from Stellantis, because I guess that CEO couldn't be bothered, and they all sound the same. We tried to give them this, we gave them that, we tried to give them this, and it fell on deaf ears. So I get the strike, and I get unions. I am definitely for unions. I will never stop stressing this, to always be a part of a union, because you get more as a group than you do by yourself. And again, it's kind of funny. One core person said that nobody wins in a strike. Well, that's bullshit. Somebody always does. Hence why the strike stops. We have seen anytime there is a strike that those who are in a union win 98% of the time. I mean, look at UPS. UPS over the summer simply wanted more pay and air-conditioned trucks. If you ever see a UPS truck, it is missing air conditioning. Those guys drive by with the doors open just to get air. And a metal box truck in a summertime is not freaking easy. And not only that, they sat there and said, well, if we don't get this, we're all walking. Now, again, arguably one of the, if not the biggest logistical company in the world, cannot afford in the U.S. take a hit when all its drivers decide that, you know what, I'm just not going to do this today. They can afford to take the hit. So what do you think they did? They upped their pay and gave them their trucks. Nurses, teachers, restaurant workers, hospital workers, they're all striking because you know why? It's getting to a point in America where we have to address the elephant in the room. That 1990s pay is not going to work in 2023. That everything going up in your paycheck, food, cost of living, rent, mortgage, gas, utilities, all that mess is going up. But yet your paycheck has remained stagnant. And these companies out here are reaping record profits. Big three in general. But at the same time, people are sitting there. I always find it funny. Whenever a rich person comes into a lot of money, whenever a corporation reports big profits, no one sits there and says anything. But when your average everyday worker says that, hey, we need more to survive, we're not asking to be millionaires, but we would like to work a job where we are sustained, where it's just one job like it used to be, where you can sustain yourself and your home and a car and your family. And people are saying, well, maybe you shouldn't be an auto worker. Maybe you shouldn't flip burgers. Maybe you shouldn't do this. Those people I always shake my head at, because there's no such thing in this day and age as a low-bearing menial job. Even in the service industry, working at a fast food joint, just because everybody still eats fast food, and no matter what, you still need people to work those lines. No amount of automation will ever make a restaurant just a one-person operation, because you do need a human soul to watch over those machines. At the same time, you still got to pay them, and that $9 to $10 an hour, that shit just doesn't fly anymore. And it's time we're honest about that. Even more so, here's the reason why I say I don't feel bad for these big three companies, because currently GM, because of the loss of money that they've reported a loss on, just secured a $6 billion credit line. $6 billion with a B. That's what GM has right now, because they said that their cost of those strikes are going over millions. And yet GM is able to go out to JP Morgan and get a $6 billion credit line. Please, oh please, tell me why I should feel bad for the big three. Why should I feel bad for them when they can literally get a credit line that could pay off maybe a tenth of student loans? Tell me why I should feel bad for companies. That's all I'm saying. But with the United Auto Workers out there, they're not the only ones striking. Kaiser Permanente is about to feel the heat as well.
Permanente are launching a 3-day strike, the largest healthcare strike really in U.S. history. Kaiser is the largest medical group in the entire country, serving nearly 1.3 million people. The employees striking, well, they make up 40% of Kaiser's total staff, impacting their facilities on the West Coast, mostly in California, in Virginia, and on the East Coast, Washington, D.C. NBC News correspondent David Noriega joins us now from just outside one of their medical centers there in Los Angeles. David, it's good to see you this Wednesday. Look, how close are both sides to actually making a deal?
You know, it depends on who you ask, Morgan. Kaiser says that they're actually very close to the union on some key issues. The union says Kaiser is not even negotiating in good faith, in some cases not even showing up to the bargaining table. That's why they're out here today in force. I want to show you, this is a very long, you're only seeing a small part of it, but it's a very long, very loud picket line. Just at this facility in LA, you have 2,000 workers. They say there are severe understaffing problems and the Kaiser is not paying enough to make up for them. Kaiser says they already pay better than all of their competitors and that the workers should make do with what they're already making, essentially. Now, we spoke to a union member who says that in an industry that's in crisis, better than average is just not good enough. Here's what he had to say.
Well, that just means that they suck less. That does not mean that they're doing better. They just are not as bad. And for us in labor, that's not good enough for our patients.
So Morgan, you can think of this 3-day strike as sort of a warning shot to Kaiser to force them to come back to the table with what the union says needs to be more serious willingness to come to an agreement. What happens from here, we'll have to see. Morgan?
And we're talking a lot of frontline workers here, David. I mean, these are workers who include nurses, technicians, janitors in the building, the people who really ultimately keep this hospital running. So what is Kaiser ultimately doing to make sure their doors even stay open during the strike?
Yeah, so you forget how many people are involved in making a hospital like this run, right? You think of doctors and you think of nurses, but there are tons of other job positions that keep a place like this operating from day to day. The answer to your question is Kaiser is bringing in temporary non-union workers. That means the hospital stays open. People can still come in to get care, but those people aren't familiar with the systems, the machines, the processes. This is going to be, no matter what, a very disruptive strike.
And that's the whole point. Strikes are not meant to be comfortable. But again, Kaiser Permanente, a healthcare company, 75,000 workers decided to go on strike. I will say it once, I will say it again. It never ceased to amaze me that when you break down the basis of a strike, it has always been the same 3 things: pay, care, and really just extend more benefits. And I get it. Workers are saying we don't want to be paid like millionaires, but we want to be able to work we want to be able to work a single job and be able to cover everything. We're not asking for millions, but we're asking for a sustainable living wage. This is why I keep on saying, guys, when it comes back to everything, if you look back at the minimum wage and wonder why are we still at $7.29 an hour, even though some states may have bumped theirs up to $10 to $15 an hour. But even then, by 2023 standards, that's still poverty wages. The whole point of the minimum wage back then was designed that you can get paid at the bare minimum, but still be able to have a home, a vehicle, utilities, and food on your plate. That's what minimum wage was designed for. The fact that companies have basically been draining the cow dry to the point to where now folks are saying, okay, you're going to strike. And corporations and companies out there are just like, oh, well, you should just work because you should be happy with what you have. Because that's what some corporations have. They have this 1970 Ronald Reagan bullshit theory. Oh, well, if you don't want to work this job, there's plenty of people out there that will. Oh, you want to get paid this? Well, why should you get paid this? Why do you want leave? You're just pregnant. Why don't you just have the baby and come back? It's that mindset. It's that mindset that we should be concerned about, that in 2023, a lot of companies still have. And yet they wonder why people go on strikes. That 3-day strike, Kaiser Permanente, is going to be a lot longer than 3 days, because if we've noticed anything, they simply just don't give up. They continue. But we'll follow that story as it comes along. Well, if you're like me and you got student loans, well, unfortunately, I have some bad news. The payments are starting back up.
Well, after 3 years of a pandemic pause, nearly 30 million Americans are back on the hook for their student loan debt. The pause lifted and set in stone after the Supreme Court struck down President Biden's attempt to cancel student debt for millions of Americans. Our Elizabeth Schulze joins us now for more. So what do borrowers, Elizabeth, actually need to know about the restart of this payments? Probably some of them, maybe many of them, not expecting this.
Well, and it's been a long time coming, 8 extensions of the pause, Kira, and here we are, October 1st, it's officially done. So that means 28 million borrowers who have federal student loan debt are now on the hook for those payments at some point over the course of this month. Generally, on average, the payment for the borrowers is between $200 and $300. So this will be a strain on Americans' budgets. And we've been talking to borrowers who talk about how this is something on top of inflation and rising interest rates. This is an additional headwind for their spending. So a couple important things to know. First of all, most borrowers should have already gotten a notice from the Education Department 21 days before their bill is due. If you still don't know when your bill is due, you should go to studentaid.gov. You can find out who your loan servicer is there, and you can find the exact bill's due date. And then important to know, there are a couple other steps right now that are trying to kind of ease borrowers back in, Kira. For example, there's a 1-year grace period on some of those loan payments. That means that if you miss a payment, you're going to be okay for a year, but you are going to still have interest add up on your loans. Interest was also frozen during the pause, and that's now adding up, and it does add up really fast, Kira.
So you spoke with a few people impacted by the end of the pause. What did they tell you?
You know, this was, we wanted to get out and talk to borrowers to see how did they change their spending and their saving over these last 3 years. When you're talking about the difference of hundreds of dollars every month, where does that money go instead? And what a lot of borrowers said was they were able to have a little bit of a financial relief. They had the question of, could they pay their bills? They weren't as worried. And, you know, Sarah Wood, she was one of the borrowers we spoke to. She's a mother. She has 2 twin daughters. She has twin daughters in Denver. And she has $180,000 in student debt, Kira. Here's what she told us about what that number looked like and what it meant during the pause.
What does that number mean to you?
It's this thing that I am probably the most ashamed of in my life. We have to think of and we have to budget for every day, and we have to budget for the future consequences of this loan every single day. You need to live in a house, you need to pay groceries, you need to eat, and then from there on, you kind of have to figure out where to skimp and save.
You know, a lot of borrowers understood that. They say that they get why there's been backlash to the fact that this pause was in place, that there's a feeling among many Americans who said, I already had to pay my debts. It's time for these people to pay their bills too. And Sarah, for example, said she gets that argument, but said this should be a conversation around broader reform about the cost of tuition, about these interest rates. How can we better educate people so that they don't find themselves with so much debt that ends up affecting their investments and their savings for their own kids too?
And so the Supreme Court ruling was, you know, a pretty big setback for President Biden. Does the White House have any future action planned on the student loans?
Well, the White House, Kira, says that it is looking into broad debt cancellation. It's trying to pursue other avenues for how to cancel up to $20,000 in debt, as we saw that the president tried to do. That was what was struck down by the Supreme Court. One possible avenue would be through the Higher Education Act, this other legal pathway. But in the meantime, there is that 1-year grace period that I talked about as far as missed payments. And then the administration has also launched this new repayment program called SAVE. And this is an income-driven repayment program. Specifically, it could help lower a lot of the monthly payments, especially for lower income borrowers. So there is a big push from the Education Department to try to get borrowers to go on, see what their payments would look like under this new plan, see if you can qualify for those lower payments and lower interest rates as a way to try to cushion some of the blow, especially if you've been struggling to throughout the past couple of years, Kira.
Okay. So again, yes, the payments are going to resume. I have been saying this for the longest time. I don't usually use the word hate a lot, but I hate when folks turn around and say, well, I was able to pay back my student loan debt. Why can't you? Well, if you couldn't make the payments, why did you take the loan not to go to college? You should have sat there and did something else. I hate that argument because not only is it just beyond the point of expiration, because I feel like I got to keep repeating myself. Number one, everybody's situation is different. Sure, you might have went to the Armed Forces, got a GI Bill. Sure, you might have had parents that saved your education. Or you might have had an inheritance to where you could sell some land or something to where you could go to college. Yeah, you can go to college debt-free. Not everybody has the same situation you do. Some people saw it as their only way to get to college. Because again, we have been saying this a long time. A certain generation out there was told, hey, to get the great jobs, get this career, you got to go to college, you got to get a degree. They didn't talk about the trade. They didn't talk about the trades that much. Although I wish they did. They didn't talk about credit that much in schools, although I wish they did. They didn't talk about finances in schools as much, but I wish they did. Now, what I'm saying is that perfect storm led a lot of kids who were definitely college bound, who believed with all the intention that they were told. You'll land a great career, you'll be making lots of money. Just think of it as an investment in yourself. See, it's amazing how we keep on saying, how do we inform people of this so they can avoid these pitfalls? When we should be asking, how are these banks and other government-funded programs allowed to talk to 18-year-olds about life-altering decision-making and at the same time not consider it predatory lending? How? That's all I want to know. How? Well, they're 18, they're adults. You want to know what I thought of as 18 as an adult? That I could go to McDonald's and get as many cheeseburgers and fries as I want and no one can stop me. Does that sound like a mature adult that is completely okay with making life-altering decisions? I think 40-year-old me will look at 18-year-old me and go, no. That dude just wants that man wants 3 double quarter pounders and you want to sign him up to a $40,000 college loan with a ridiculous APR? And banks will be like, yes. Because you know why? Banks don't see students. Banks see those who they are stuck with for forever paying customers. Because not only do you got to count the interest is the killer, then the principal. And that's if you hope to see the end of it. Most people that are borrowers never see the end of it. Some may luck out. Some may even get their debts forgiven. But for a good majority of people, it's never ending. And again, student loan debt will forever affect you. Because number one, for a debt to ratio and credit scores, it can prevent you from getting a home. It can prevent you from getting a car. It can prevent you from getting a good job because jobs check credit too. So if you have a lot of student loan debt, that is seen as a red flag. And that may make you miss out on jobs despite all your qualifications. So yes, student loan debt is a progressive killer. But we don't discuss the predatory lending that these banks do. We don't discuss why the cost of education goes up every year, but it's still the same education. We don't discuss why in middle and high schools are finance and credit classes not being taught to the level that private schools do. We're not talking about that. But we're simply saying, oh, well, personal responsibility. Well, how very conservative of you. But alas, it's not all bad news, because here's the one thing that Biden is surprising me with doing. He is forgiving debt, student loan debt, here and there.
He's canceling another $9 billion in student loan debt. This comes as borrowers are bracing for payments to restart after a 3-year pause during the pandemic and afterwards. This latest round of loan forgiveness is expected to help 125,000 borrowers. The president announced the move at the White House just a little while ago.
This kind of relief is life-changing for individuals and their families, but it's good for our economy as a whole as well. By freeing millions of Americans from the crushing burden of student debt, it means they can go and get their lives in order. They can think about buying a house. They can start a business. They can be starting a family. This matters. It matters in their daily lives.
For more, let's bring in our Elizabeth Schulze. So, Elizabeth, which borrowers will actually be directly impacted by this specific announcement? And, what does it mean for them?
Well, Kira, this is not a new program here. Basically, what the Biden administration is doing is trying to right some of the wrongs in the existing student loan repayment system to try to give relief to borrowers who've already been enrolled in those programs and should have their debt forgiven, but didn't for various reasons like administrative reasons or just overlooked by the Department of Education. So today's announcement covers $9 billion in student debt cancellation. About 125,000 borrowers will be affected. And specifically, we're talking about borrowers who are enrolled in public service loan forgiveness programs and in income-driven repayment programs. These are a drop in the bucket when we're talking about the backdrop here. And I think this is really important in the context that as of this month, 28 million borrowers are repaying their student loans because that federal pause on payments came to an end. And so the Biden administration is trying to show we're taking the incremental steps that we can, but there is this reality that a lot of borrowers are going to once again be on the hook after they weren't for 3 years during the pandemic. And I've been talking to a lot of those borrowers. One of them is Jessica Record. She works in education in California. She said that the pause really gave her family a lot of breathing room during the pandemic. And here's what she said now that those payments are starting up once again.
I don't think as far as, any line items, there's not really anything that we can cut. There was breathing room in the pandemic, and now there's no more breathing room.
So the president acknowledging the reality here that millions of borrowers facing that new constraint on their budgets with these payments due, trying to say are trying to take the steps possible within the existing system, knowing that there's not a lot of action on Congress on this, and that the Supreme Court already struck down that broader plan for up to $20,000 in debt cancellation too, guys.
Right, and the Supreme Court did so because they say only Congress can forgive that much debt. The president can't do it on his own. He lost that argument in the court, so it's up to Congress. And you say they're a little busy trying to get themselves organized. So, once again, to people.
So that's the wild part I want to get into, because a lot of people are scratching their heads and going, "Wait a minute." So Congress can forgive debt, but how can Biden forgive $9 billion in student loans? Because, well, much like the IRS, the government financial system is woefully outdated, underfunded, and underwhelmed. Because those that were in those income repayment plans for a number of years, once enough payments have been made, their debts will be forgiven. But because it's a conservative approach to it, it usually has to take up to 10 years for your loans to be forgiven. So why am I saying this? I am saying this for the simple fact of the matter, guys, that let's not forget one thing. The Paycheck Protection Program. See, anytime someone brings up, well, you should never take out those loans then, I usually bring this up. So you do remember the Paycheck Protection Program, right? The one by Steve Mnuchin that basically gave out money to everybody. A system was so broken that some folks got millions that didn't have a business, but got millions of dollars from the government. Now, a lot of those businesses got their loans forgiven. And I say this all the time. So you're mad. Would you be mad if businesses out there took loans out from the government and instead of paying them back, their loans were forgiven and they got to keep whatever profits they made? Tick you off a little bit, wouldn't it? Silence. Oh, but more than 25 million Americans with student loan debt want the student loan debt wiped out. Well, wait a minute. Who's gonna pay for that? Not me. Why do I have to pay for someone else's choices? Why do I gotta do all this? Not realizing, for the simple fact of the matter, guys, we're paying for the paycheck protection program in our taxes. Those businesses, those rich folks, those corporations that took out PPP loans, that got their loans forgiven, we picked up the tab. And it's amazing how no one points that out. But you want to get mad at former students because they want a fresh start. Like the lady said in the article, like they said in the news break, when you don't pay student loans, you could breathe a little bit. You could put something away. You could actually get ahead in life. But now that student loans are coming back, if I was Biden, bump it. I would still push for it again. I mean, yes, you have a divided House in the Republicans, but again, I push for it. Even though Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema will sit there and say, no, we can't do it while trying to play Democrat, but really they're Republican. But again, push for it, because it makes no sense that in this day and age, Americans just simply cannot get a break. But unless you're a business, unless you're rich, or you're a firearm, you get no protection from the U.S. whatsoever. That, my friends, is terrible. But the last story I got, guys, before we go into our Feel Good News segment, imagine, for the simple fact of the matter, of technology. It's great, right? Facial recognition is great. To a certain extent, until you're falsely accused of something that you didn't do in a state that you've never been in, and that law enforcement is ever so helpful to people of color. And yes, I'm being sarcastic.
I was headed to my mom's house for Thanksgiving to celebrate with my family and whatnot. And on my way that way, I got pulled over by the police. I didn't know why I was being pulled over. When I asked why, they told me I was being pulled over for a warrant, and they just continued to ask me my name. Once they verified it was me, they pulled me out the car, and they locked me up, and they told me that I had a warrant, and I asked them for what and from where. And they told me that I had a warrant out of Jefferson Parish. I asked, where's Jefferson Parish? Because I had never heard of that county, and then they told me it was in Louisiana. Then I was confused because I have never been to Louisiana. But also when they told me that my warrant was for theft, I was confused as well too. I was just locked up for the next week. I asked them, why was I being locked up, or what is it even saying that I did? And then they just kept telling me that it was out of their jurisdiction and they didn't really know. So I basically just had to wait until Louisiana officers would come get me, and then I would have more details. I was finding out that I was arrested for a physical theft, actually, not like something that happened online. So I found out that I was supposed to be arrested for something that I did in person in Louisiana. I found out that it happened through a video, and that they looked at the video to try to recognize who the people were.
Ron had a lawyer based out of the Baton Rouge, Jefferson Parish area. When we called him about this case, he said, hey guys, I think I know what this is. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure I know what it is. He said, what y'all can do is send him some pictures of Karan, and let him go down and speak to a detective and speak to someone he knew on the force. In doing that, he found out, and in turn told us, hey, they use this facial identity recognition software. And here's what's interesting about Clearview, and in their agreement with Jefferson Parish, it states we're not to be a single source provider, meaning don't use us as the only reference for your arrest. And one of the things that we found out is that, one, the facial recognition technology is disproportionately affecting African Americans. And that's noted, that's researched, everybody, it's in the documentation. So the other cases that are around, they're dealing with African Americans. So the technology, the industry, the law enforcement agencies know that African Americans are affected more by this technology than individuals of a different race.
Well, you know, there's always risk when you go to jail, but I felt more in danger when I was being detained because I know it was for something I didn't do. So at that point, I had kind of lost faith in, I guess I would say I lost faith in the justice system to know that you could be locked up for something that you've never done.
And that's sad. And again, guys,
The office.
Sorry. So again, guys, that's what actually happened. That the simple fact of the matter is, facial recognition, I really mistakenly identified that young man. And law enforcement, who depended on this, refused to do anything. They were like, well, that's what it is. You just got to wait. So imagine, if you will, being accused of something that you didn't do, but because of lazy law enforcement and faulty facial recognition software, that you got stuck until someone had to sit there and say, well, it's not him. This is why I sit there and say, when that happens, and I hope it never happens to anybody, especially people of color. I hope it doesn't happen to you guys. This is what they try to say. Oh, well, facial recognition saw that as you, or someone said you fit the description, or a guy with your bill was at the scene of the crime, but you know it wasn't you. This is why I sit there and say, know the laws. Know the laws. Know yourself. The reason why? Cops love an angry person of color because it gives them justification. Cops love a scared, angry person of color, a scared person of color, because it gives them justification. You know what? They cannot stand above all else. And yes, I'm after the police if you haven't figured that out by now. But you want to know what they cannot stand above all else? A cool, calm, collected, knowledgeable person of color. When you're calm, when you're level-headed, and you know the law better than they do, they can't stand you. They cannot. Because an officer has to tell you what you're being arrested for. It's part of the Miranda rights. Oh, if you don't get to Miranda rights, if your Miranda rights aren't given to you at the time of your arrest, your case is thrown out regardless. Judges hate that, because I can tell you, being in traffic court many times, that when judges found out that a person's Miranda rights was not given to them, they had no choice but to throw the case out and cuss the officer out that forgot to do that a little bit. But getting back to the story, though, guys, facial recognition literally failed. But this is the human side. I mean, that's the AI side of it. The human side should have been like, wait a second, this isn't the guy. I mean, officers with all that technology, all of this at your fingertips, failed this young man. So that's why I don't blame him for getting a lawyer. I hope he sues the mess out of the entire department. I really hope he does. Because again, I have said this many before. I've said this once, I've said it many times, I'll say it again. Whenever it comes to law enforcement, only in America could you spend more time training to be a plumber, electrician, an IT person, a nail tech. You train longer in those careers than you do in law enforcement. And it shows dramatically. But we'll follow up on that story as it comes along. But young man, but also another thing I wish they would do too, is that you want to stop these police mistakes, attack the money. Tie police pensions as payment banks for those they've wronged. For every time a cop does something, it comes out of the pension fund to those victims or that victim if they're alive. You want to taking money out of cops' hands? We'll stop that overnight. I promise you. Because we can sit there and say we want police reform. I'll sit there and say, no, I want that police pension. And watch how quickly things change. Same with politicians and government shutdowns. Tie the politicians' payments and tie their payments, things of that nature, to government shutdowns, because a government worker should not have to worry about how to make ends meet, while a representative and a senator are going to be just fine, basically getting paid for doing nothing. Things need to change. But We're going to go ahead and move on to our Feel Good segment, guys. As usual, how the Frack we got here, we do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes you lose your faith in humanity, but hey, it's Wednesday, it's hump day. Tomorrow is Friday Eve, which is Thursday. And we will leave you guys out some good vibrations, and hopefully some Black Girl Magic will do that as gymnastic phenom Simone Biles has once again done the impossible.
All right, that's history right there. You're looking at it, 7:30 new history from the always amazing Simone Biles. That vault that you just saw right there, it's called the Yurchenko double pike. And yesterday, Simone became the first woman to land it at the World Gymnastics Championships. Therefore, that new vault is now going to be called the Simone Biles.
That's amazing.
Because she nailed it like she nails everything.
It's just like I could watch that all day. How fast she gets, how high
she's getting better.
It's incredibly fantastic.
She's getting better.
By the way,
Wow.
she sits in first place in the
does.
all-around qualification, and the women's team's going for the 7th title there. All right.
Live coverage on Peacock as per usual.
I don't know about y'all. That's impressive as shit. That's not only Simone Biles, which by the way, this is the same gymnast. This is the same woman that was so talented, was so good that she had to get halted in half the things that she does. She had to be restrained. That is saying a lot. And the Yurchenko, if I'm pronouncing that right, the fact that she now has that move named after her again is just great. It is great on so many forms, but definitely congratulations to her. She definitely deserves all the flowers. But that's going to do for this podcast, guys. I do thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know this is up and running. I certainly appreciate that. Some shameless plugging before I do get out of here. Shout out to my boy Vaughn at Big BZA Dot. You can definitely check out him and his beat channel on YouTube. If you are interested in beats or beats that he makes, he does sell them. Definitely check him out. Big BZA Dot on all social media. Also, guys, myself, you can find me Blackbox447 on all socials. I usually do reviews of everything that I watch, that I read, that I play in, gym stuff, because I do a couple push-ups. Also, let me shout out Blurred Station. I really did get that graphic up. Blurred Station is the new wave, guys. I cannot stress this enough in a day and age where content seems to go on and go off. Netflix and everybody else is knocking up the prices. Blurred Station is the new wave for blurred entertainment, not just entertainment. I'm not talking just shows. I'm not talking music. I'm not talking movies. I am talking the whole 9 yards. BlurredStation.com is definitely something you want to check out right now. I highly recommend it. Also, my link at the bottom, guys, I'm going to get this a little bit bigger for you guys to see. If you copy and paste that link into your browser, we'll take you to my link tree that has the YouTube and Facebook groups for all my podcasts. How the Frack got here, Get Bit, of course, Offense Podcast. Definitely like, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think. The only rule I have about conversations, guys, keep it clean and keep out the facts. Again, we're not always going to agree. We're going to agree on something, but we also have to make sure that we can agree to disagree. And of course, let the facts speak the truth, not the fact of what you believe out of your basement or whatever was on Fox News or The Blaze. But again, healthy conversation, guys, is all that I'm asking. Aside from that, guys, we will hopefully be back once again, back here on this wonderful stage, whether it be depending on Mark Zuckerberg does not decide to get rid of us or YouTube decide to get rid of us. But again, let me know what you think. Let me know of your opinions of this. I cannot stress this enough, guys. I cannot stress this enough. We are not too far off from the presidential election to determine who is going to basically be, whether Joe gets another term or we see Revenge of the Sith starring Donald Trump Part 2. I do not know. However, I will stress this very heavily. Get involved and get informed, not just of the federal national landscape, but your local areas too, your local governments, your state governments. Get involved, get to know the candidates, see who actually drives their values, and then go vote. I cannot stress that enough. Go vote. Your votes matter. If nothing else, Georgia's special election should have proven that votes do matter. And because they are trying to change the goalposts, they're trying to change the way you vote, things of that nature, screams volumes of how scared they are when people in numbers actually use their voice. That's all I'm saying. But Again, with how the Frack we got here, we're basically all about keeping you informed. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel or anything of that nature. We are simply giving you all the information to allow you to make up your own mind, but we do provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do a lot better as a society once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like electing our first Black woman Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman for a board of governors, electing our first Black woman as a national cybersecurity director. All great things. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat them. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go up on our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack we got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll all get through this. Peace.